Okay, welcome to Drugs and Crimes. This is our fourth week. Quarter's moving pretty fast. We have a couple more weeks after this to go, so just hang on in there. I'm going to tell you to make sure you activate your audio. Okay. Okay, good. So we got everybody in. So let's go ahead and let's start the recording. We have already. So let's get right into the module. Okay, let's bring it up. There it goes. Okay. And as you can see, the lectures for the last few weeks. Now, you should be aware of the fact that I made some changes in the calendar. It was brought to my attention that term 2 is different, and that you will see in a few minutes the changes I made in the calendar, which actually makes it a little longer. And so anyway, week 3. Now, the thing I did want to point out to you is that I changed the last lecture to take place Tuesday, June 12th, because in reality, the quarter doesn't end until June 15th at 11:59 p.m. You'll see that in a few minutes. So that's the one thing. If you copied the calendar before, you might want to go back and take a look at that, because you have 3 additional days added on because it's term 2. I'm still trying to get the hang of these 5.5s, and 5.1 operates one way, 5.5 term 1 operates one way, 5.5 term 2 operates another way, and so I'm getting the hang of it. So today we're going to cover the requirements for this week. Let's take a look and see what we got here. Drug-related criminal activity. Drug enforcement perspective will be presented. Read chapter 6 and 7, which I previously sent you the PowerPoints, and we're going to deal with drugs and law enforcement response to the heroin epidemic a little bit. I talked quite a bit last week about some instances pertaining to the heroin epidemic, referring to this seminar that I attended, which was very, very, very beneficial and helped a whole lot. So anyway, we're going to have you this week to do your discussion post on forfeiture. Very interesting topic. I'll talk a little bit about forfeiture, but it's very interesting. And then your course project, heroin and opioids, law enforcement perspective, and then your quiz. And then try to complete your mid-quarter student survey as well. Okay, so now let's take a quick look at the calendar, which you can see the changes that took place since last week. Okay. So there's really no change in what we have right now. Everything here is the same. Your reading assignment, your initial post, your reply post, then your quiz. And I do recommend, again, that you take the quiz at the end of the week. Some students still insist on taking the quiz earlier in the week, but I highly recommend taking the quiz later in the week. And then next week. Now, let me show you, that'll be week 5 next week. then let's go and take a look at what I want to show you. We'll be in June as of next week. So that'll be week 5, and our lectures, everything is going to be still at Tuesdays. So you'll see now what has happened now. Originally, next week, I was going to have a lecture Tuesday and one Friday, but not going to happen because when it was brought to my attention that the quarter doesn't end on the 12th, but instead ends on the 15th, I said, oh, I can just keep it Tuesday. So but the one thing I do want to bring to your attention for that week is that everything will be due that Friday, not that Saturday, and not that following Sunday, the 17th. So the 15th, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard will be the last thing. You'll see that in the announcements as well when you get to week 6 as well. So that's the change that we made there, okay? So now let's close that up and let's get into the module itself. Okay, again, I point out to you that the Drugs and Crimes Guide, very, very, very good tool that's embedded in the course to help you with your research and preparation of your assignments. So let's go back to our assignments. Remember, the rubric rules. It rules in terms of you getting your grades. And it tells you in here in bold print things that are important for your course project this week. But then if you go back, click on your assignment, you will see the rubric. It is due Sunday the 3rd. And then if you click on rubric, you'll see the same information in the quality and content, telling you what you have to make sure you do to get the 30 points. And then what you have to do to get most people will lose their points on not satisfying the 3-page requirement. Remember, the 3-page requirement does not count the cover page and the reference page. And 3 pages means 3 pages, double spaced, not single space, double spaced. With citations and references, that's how you can gain all of your points here. And then reliable and credible sources, and we already have probably hammered Wikipedia into your head as a source that you don't use at all. Okay, so you want to maximize that, satisfy that, okay? And then that's that. So then we go back and we see the rest of the assignment. And that takes us down to the discussion post, which you guys have started working on. And that's the initial post is due tonight, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then, of course, you know your reply post is due. And then your quiz, we already talked about that. And then, of course, your live lecture, and then the non-graded student survey. All right. I really am interested in that because this is the first time I'm teaching the 5.5 of this course. I like it. I think things are going along at a good pace, and I will have your grades completed a few more days on up to week 3. So, all right. So now let's go to some discussion that we can have before we conclude for the day. Notice these lectures are not very long, so we get right into it. As you know, that there is and then these are again your assignments. So let's get right into drug trafficking organizations, how we fight them, and what we're trying to do. as you know already, there is an epidemic and that people are dying. The war on drugs situation, as we talked about last week, has not worked very well, and that now the approach is to try to rehabilitate individuals who are using drugs and to help individuals. But drug trafficking continues from places like China, Mexico, and other countries. It is interesting. I have learned some techniques when I was a police officer some years ago that, and you probably heard of this, how they smuggle drugs into the country. You know, they put them in vehicles. I'm talking about engine blocks, fake bottoms in vehicles. But one of the other things that they do is they have people to actually swallow these drugs in balloons. You probably heard of this. And people swallow these things, and usually when you find overdoses, it's because the balloon ruptured in the body, and then because of the quantity of drug that's in the balloon, it would kill them. And then you know that how they retrieve them, they go to the washroom, and anyway, that's how that works. So it's pretty sounds nasty, but it's also very dangerous. So dealing with the Chinese, it says major wholesale and distributors of opium and heroin. Some manufacturers are adding fentanyl and caffeine to heroin powder. And, you know, as I already said, they cut it with all kinds of stuff, synthetic drugs, prescription drugs, and so forth. And it reaches the stage that, and this carfentanil is a sedative used for elephants. And so what has happened is they're putting this in your narcotics, and people are ingesting them into their body. And so there's an issue that many of the drugs that you buy on the street, most of the ones you buy, are not pure. And also you should be aware too that probably some of the pure drugs would probably kill you pretty fast as well. So, and I'm not going to go over this article. Take time to read this article about trafficking from China to the United States. But that's a border issue. So we have an organization that deals with this, that our top law enforcement agency, we call them the feds, is the DEA, or Drug Enforcement Administration. And they try to deal with organizations all over that are shipping drugs, particularly the Mexican cartels. And you are aware of the fact that El Chapo is the head of, is alleged to be the head of Mexican, one of the largest Mexican cartels. And so DEA agents have infiltrated his organization, and they extend to South America, Latin America, Mexico, and everything is being done to try to disrupt the flow of these drugs. And so informants, where people actually, they catch them, and then they want to get the big guy. So what they'll do is they'll use the small guy, offer them a deal, and then they will wear wires, or they will operate as operatives. You have undercover officers. You have situations which I participated in some of these buy busts back in the day, where I worked with the county area, not the feds. I knew about the feds and worked somewhat with them, but the drug bust is when somebody will buy the drugs and you're the dealer, and they will come to you and they will get busted, of course, because they're buying drugs from you. Not entrapment. And then, as I talked about, the wire. The wire is one of the most powerful tools that's used because you get the person's words spoken against themselves. And in large-scale cases, there's a whole lot of these type of things that are working all together. And so it says, in addition to the DEA, other federal agencies, you have the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives. You have, or ATF, as we call them. And then you have Homeland Security now, which is a new thing that didn't exist when I was out there, because Homeland Security, as you probably know, didn't come about until after September 11th, 2001. And so now what these agencies are trying to do is to cut it off at the border and recognizing when shipments are coming across. And so what they and the Border Patrol agents inspect vehicles and patrol those borders all the time, constantly. Then when you get into the states, you got the state troopers, you got a whole lot of various agencies working together to try to combat it. And what they're trying to do is get the large quantities. Almost every time, I'd say probably about 4 or 5 times a year here in our area, we have a major drug bust. And I'm talking about where caches of drugs, I'm talking about millions of dollars of drugs are seized. You see some of these big packs of drugs that are seized, along with a lot of money, because along with drugs goes cash and guns. In addition to the federal law enforcement agencies, the state, county, and municipal, as I was telling you, I worked within those areas primarily, worked together, and we deal with a lot of people at the street level, but try to get people to flip and to give us. Now, one of the fears is that they fear that there will be some retribution. Now, some retaliation against their family members. And so it's oftentimes a very serious problem. But you can look at the map and you see all the cartels that are all over the place. Now, reason why Mexico is such a easy deal for them is because, if you notice, it's connected to South America and through Latin America, and then coming up through and goes all the way up to like Texas, Arizona, California, and so that's where a lot comes in, and a lot of drugs are shipped into the United States by these cartels. And then you can see where you'll see a lot of the influences taking place, the drugs and so forth and so on. So it's a real serious issue. So all those different agencies attempt to control the flow of drugs. So let's talk about law enforcement's response to the epidemic of heroin that we've already established that exists. And so it says many communities have seen an increase in heroin-related overdoses. We talked about that kind of last week, and how addicts inject the drugs and all kinds of ways of getting it into their body, which result in death. And so now there are things that will help the individuals when they overdose on these. Narcan, for example, is a brand name of a drug we call Noxawan, and it is an antidote. And what happens, and it's a very expensive drug, and it's carried now by law enforcement, fire departments, and it's even kept at some schools. And what it does is it counteracts the the slow breathing and the stopping of breathing. So what it says is it blocks the effect. It's an antibody and reverses the whole overdose symptom. And the thing is that it's very, 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 very expensive. And as I said here, first responders pretty much provide those drugs. And there's some other things now that are coming about. But Noxalone, now I can't say Noxalone, naloxone or Narcan, that's the way we like to talk about it, is right now the most powerful thing that's used. And when you think about that, but the problem is, guys, is that unfortunately people don't get the 911 call fast enough out, or someone reaches to get the help there, and sometimes by the time they get there, the person has already died. It doesn't bring you back to life. What it does is it stops it in its tracks. And if it hasn't gone too far, there's a chance that person can survive. I remember listening to the guys last week that I told you about. They talked about this. In fact, they had a sample showing us what it looked like and how it's injected to the body right real quick and by like a needle. And so it's kind of like you guys might be familiar with the EpiPen. It kind of operates on the same basis, and it stops the effects. But again, it's not an all in all. So it says in 2015, FDA approved nasal application. But the nasal application is something that is happening, and it says it's easier for the first responders to administer as well. But I was talking to a first responder about which is better, the nasal or the shot. They said the shot. They said the shot is faster, gets into your bloodstream and your system, and it provides an opportunity for you to have a greater chance. And then you got to remember that if it's injected, the individual also has to inhale it and breathe it. And if they're not strong enough to, then they will succumb to the drug. But there's a whole lot of things that are coming along. There's another drug, which I can't think of the name of it at this present time, that they talk about as you get a shot at, and it helps you as well. The key thing is this, is that what we're trying to do is do two things. Law enforcement is trying to cut off the flow, and then those individuals who actually overdose, we now have something that can help possibly save their lives when it didn't exist before. And again, just remember though, the key thing is that it's a time basis. It is a issue that is not a all in all. I think we're talking about in our classes, and then I've heard law enforcement officers recently say that the best thing is to help individuals not just to recover from heroin in a first responder type situation, but to educate those individuals to reach the level, or help them to reach the level, because as one of the guys said, and both of the guys said last week, is that nothing's going to change until the individual who is on heroin decides that they don't want to do it. And both of those guys, as I talked about last week, gave reasons and situations and circumstances that led to them no longer using heroin. So what does that leave us? With a lot of work. So you guys that are coming out into the criminal justice field, law enforcement, uh, 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 emergency technicians, nurses, um, doctors, and just school officials, everybody pitching in to try to save a life. And as was pointed out to us, is that Narcan is just a small step, but guess what? It's important. If it saves one life, and one of the guys said that it helped him. He wouldn't have been there last week. He wouldn't have been alive if it wasn't for that. But you know, what we don't want to do is have people to be enabled by saying, "Oh, I can do this," and then I can overdose. So you don't want to get caught in that kind of a situation at all. So there's a few articles down here at the bottom that you can read, and they will help you to get more details on it. I'm not going to open them, but you can just click on these blue links in your module. And the one that I'd like to see is the article about drug kits that deal with police dogs. Now, did you not know that police dogs, that drug sniffing dogs, they end up having to sniff this stuff, and guess what happens? They can overdose on it, and when they find themselves in a situation, they will need to take these drugs to help to survive. I mean, because they're in harm's way. You got to remember, they're snorting this stuff, so it's getting into their system. So there's kits now to help save those dogs. So anyway, let's see if we can get this video up. I'm going to see if I can do it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And if it is, I will take my headset off, and then we will look at this together. Okay, this one looks like it's going to work. So I'm going to take off my headset, and then let's take a look at this video. It's only about 4 minutes.
Prescription pills and opiates has definitely become an increasing problem that we see, you know, not only involving the crimes to investigate actual drug diversion, but it, you know, involves other things too. People start committing other crimes when they start seeing, you know, the need that they have to get these drugs. I think the worst part of it is that starting at, you know, kids at a very young age, kids that are, you know, middle school even are starting to find out what these pills are, and they might think it's fun at first, and then, you know, you talk to them a year, 2 years later, and you realize it's a different story. I mean, so, you know, just the degree that people go to get these pills is insane. I mean, I've seen people that drive 7 hours one way every month each way, so that's a 14-hour round trip just to get these pills because, you know, so you need a job. You can't work your job anymore because all you care about is, you know, driving up to get these pills. And I mean, your life is over because all you can focus on is how do I get these drugs.
We've done search warrants in huge homes, multi-million-dollar houses, fancy cars, and we've done search warrants in houses where there's no food in the refrigerators. I remember one individual subject, I arrested his mother and his father, and also arrested him. He was injecting OxyContin, as many as 35 a day, intravenously, and he was using creek water just out of a local stream because he was living out in the woods. Everybody thinks they pop a few pills, it's no big deal. You young kids out there, you better just be very, very aware of what's going on with these pills. You can get addicted with one pill, and for the rest of your life, it will absolutely ruin you. It doesn't discriminate against you young or old, or you're black, or you're white, or you're male, or you're a female. I've arrested from 12 years old to 86 years old. I've arrested grandma and grandpa. I've arrested a young boy that takes the pills from his parents' cabinet and takes them to school and gives them to some other kids in school. When somebody gets sick, gets rushed to a hospital, and thank God doesn't die. I've worked probably at least 24 overdose deaths that are 100% related to prescription meds where it's too late, they're already dead.
A lot of students went down the road, a lot of young people go down the road of trying to drug for recreational purposes, and they don't understand the devastation that it has to their own life and the lives of their parents. I should add, the victims of the crime include infants. We have had subjects who were pregnant women who gave birth to oxycodone, opiate-addicted babies and infants. They even had to have the baby in jail, and it's a growing problem as well.
Seen a lot of overdoses, a lot of deaths. The scary thing is it's getting younger and younger. It used to be the heroin overdoses seemed like they were all adults. Lately they've been getting younger and younger, low 20s, even into their high teens. I've talked to hundreds of heroin addicts or opiate addicts, and they'll tell me the same thing. If they could do one thing different, they never would have started in the first place. That's the one regret that they all have is that they started when they were young, and once you're an addict for life. And the best way to avoid that is just to never do it.
We're seeing a dramatic shift in how it's affecting the lives of young people. They're experimenting with friends at parties, and they think it's safe to take pills from the medicine cabinet or a friend. And during a 1 week period, we had 9 fatal overdoses in a 3-jurisdiction area. And over the Christmas holiday, I read 2 obituaries of people that I had arrested for prescription fraud and related offenses. Their parents buried them. They were young, 20-some years old.
Okay, so you see, there's some things there. There's just a few things there that gave you an idea of what's happening out there, and you want to make sure that you want to educate people, and law enforcement perspective given here shows very seriously that people are going to have to learn. And when you see situations like what those guys presented to us last week, it helps you to appreciate and understand the seriousness of what takes place in this. So I'm going to go back to the classroom, and I am going to say to you that I want to see heroin addiction. Heroin addiction. That's it. That's what I'm looking for. Heroin addiction. So I will see you next week. If you have any questions about your assignments, feel free to reach out to me. You know the rules. And I'm going to say good night and have a good evening.